wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Como.
Hello and welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and today we have a special guest that embodies the elements through instructional coaching and strong cultures. Joining us is Jordan Henley. Jordan is a science educator and communicator on a mission to help people feel the joy, curiosity, and imagination that she feels in science. With a PhD in science education at the University of Georgia, Jordan utilizes her knowledge and experience for speaking engagements, consulting, and content creation collaboration. Welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast, Jordan. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So the first thing that I want to unpack here is just getting to know, how did you get to where you are now?
So I am from Jackson, Mississippi. That's where I grew up. And it's also like where I started teaching in the same district that I went to school in. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was in high school, but I was always really good at science and that was always my thing. And so everybody was like, be a doctor. So I tried like that for a while and was like, this isn't working for me. And was like, you know what I really always wanted to do was teach. So I'm going to go do it. And I had always really loved science since I was a little girl. And my mom, like talking to her now as an adult, she was always really intentional about that. And she's, I just threw it at you. So did I just love it or did my mom just flood it over me until I had no choice? But either way, it was always just, for me, science was always like a place of comfort and safety. And either I have an answer or I know how to get an answer. And I just was always felt very confident in scientific spaces. And so when I became a teacher and realized that my students weren't having that same experience, especially like teaching in the same district I grew up in, the district is mostly Black. And so 99% of my students were Black students. And so walking to this classroom, like seeing kids who look like me from the same city I'm from, going to not the same school I went to, but the same district, have such a vastly different experience of science than I had was like just like a wake up call. And it made me want to, I was like, there has to be more to this. There has to be a better way to do this whole science teaching thing, which granted, I did an alternate route program. So it's not like I had in-depth instruction on instruction, but I just was like, I don't know, there has to be something better. And that's what led me to getting the PhD. And then just through a series of events of that got me to here.
That's such a good story. I love it. So when you made the jump to go from pursuing medical doctor to becoming a teacher because we like science, what was the root of that decision? Like, why teaching?
When I was in high school, like even before high school, I always had really great teachers. And like from elementary school on, and they always were like, I had fun. I felt really supported. They always really pushed us to do the best that we can. They did not accept mediocrity. And I had a lot of teachers that would call me on my BS. I have a memory of one of my teachers who, like, I finished a vocabulary quiz in 5 minutes and she was like, I'm not even going to grade this. You didn't check it. Go sit back down. And so I just had a lot of support from from my teachers. And then in about 11th grade, my 10th grade English teacher, her name was Miss Brierly, Teresa Brierly. I believe she's still at the same school that I went to. But I loved her class in 10th grade. In 11th grade, she let me just come and hang out. Now that I'm a teacher, I'm like, bless her heart, because we would be in there during her planning. We'd be in there before school. We'd be in there after school. And when our school had traditionally done a yearly trip to Atlanta for 11th graders. And they canceled it the year I hit 11th grade. And I was like, oh no, absolutely not. And we went to her and we were like, hey, we want to have this trip. And she was like, look, if you plan it, I'll do the, administrative stuff, but y'all have to do all the details. I'll just submit paperwork. And just like that experience, I think is like what made my brain like flip and go, I think I want to be a teacher, because it's just like, there was never like the statement of y'all are capable, you can do these things, like I believe in y'all, but everything she did communicated it. And I was like, oh, I think I want to do for other people what so many people have done for me. And I want to be able to share the things I love with students and help them to experience it too. And then when I expressed that I wanted to be a teacher, everybody was like, no. And I was still young and very much didn't want to let anybody down. And since middle school, I have been saying I wanted to be a doctor or a physician. And I just was very nervous about letting anybody down. So I still pursued it through college and for a couple years after college. But then at one point I just was like, no, I don't think this is what I want to be doing. The idea of going to medical school, years of residency and different things like that, I just was like, I don't think that's for me. And so I was like, I knew I wanted to be a teacher in high school. Let's try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it can't hurt to try.
Again, just I love that response. I'm not surprised because as you shared your first story about entering into your job and seeing your community that didn't have the same joy that you had, you were bringing them experiences and you were giving them opportunities, and it was about the exposure and the opportunity you could give them. And then when I went back and asked you, why did you get into teaching? You rooted it back to the experience that you're wanting to
Yeah.
bring people. And so your earth is very rooted in what you can support people around you with. And that's very clear in just those two descriptions. We could have a whole nother tangent of a conversation here because I'm a science nerd myself. I've got the Elemental Educator theme, and I just finished my Chem 20 course with my kiddos, and we just finished our stoichiometry unit and titration labs. And we're in a whole different world here. That's a whole other episode that we'll get to. And going through my doctorate too, I'm sitting here and you made the comment about medical school, and I'm like, man, at this point I feel like I could have done that because the amount of schooling I've been in to get to here, we easily could have. This is so much more rewarding in my opinion. I feel like I'm making such a powerful impact in the education world, and you are too with the things that you're doing. I do want to ask though, with your PhD, were there any insights or breakthroughs from the work you did that influenced your professional practice?
Oh, 3 million. Countless. I couldn't begin to quantify it. The thing I think that sticks out most for me is it wasn't a new thing. It just was like being more conscious of it. I feel like people think like getting a PhD means you're smart. And
It
it's
just
just
means you have
persistence.
perseverance.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
just like you
Yeah.
refuse to give up.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that and learning how to pace myself through things, like, because very similar to teaching, when you're doing a doctorate, there's always something to be done. And figure out how to pace yourself so you don't burn out and you can keep going and you can just have a doggedness, but also know how to pull back and rest and recover. But then also, the most important thing I think the PhD experience taught me was that there's always more to a situation than it first appears. There's always more context that you could gather. There's always more that you can learn. And that in general, in any given space in our lives, we have a very shallow understanding of what's going on. And the reason I felt like that was so impactful to my teaching was I had always tried to be like a patient teacher and the teacher who was considerate of students' needs and like the different things they had going on. But I feel like that sort of click in my brain of there's always context you don't see helped me to do it more and more effectively and not get like I guess frustrated or make assumptions as easily. If a kid comes and puts their head down every day instead of going, they're just not interested, da, da, da. It's like, all right, what's going on there? We got to do some research. I feel like more than anything, that was the thing for me.
I really like to do a science starter at the start of all my classes, and I call it a claim evidence reasoning starter, where I'll put a riddle or a picture or something up, and every student has to make the claim of what they see, their evidence behind what they're seeing, and the reason why. And it's a testament to what you're sharing right now because not everyone has the same answer. They all have that different perspective. They're all seeing something different from what you put up there. So you're absolutely right. And everything that we're interacting with, we can look through a science lens and see what is our claim, our evidence, and reasoning behind that, and recognize that we might have different perspectives. This whole foundation was built off of Aristotle being wrong with the elements forming everything. Democritus was right all the time, but Aristotle was more popular. So
Yeah.
we end up believing them that way. That's just how things rolled. Thank you for sharing. And within that, I think I'm not sure if it's the same where you are right now, but where I am, our science curriculum hasn't changed in a long time. And it's going to change within the next few years. We are rolling out new curriculum. But as teaching is evolving and curriculum's not evolving, how are you as a science teacher working through these advancements to the new modern era of students?
I think for me, it's mostly just I hear there's a lot of conversations that like the kids are different. And I'm always like, I don't know. Are they different or are we different? And is the world
Yeah.
different? And they're just reacting to
Yeah.
that. And so then like for me, like that follows to, okay, so what is it about the world that's different? And how do I need to engage with that to be able to engage with my student? And then I like to try to put myself back into the mindset of when I was in high school a lot. Yeah, I did love science and it was my jam, but also I don't remember the day that I learned protein synthesis because like the details of it, I'm sure I was like, I got to learn this for a test, but it didn't necessarily excite me at the time. And for all that, I absolutely adored all of my teachers. And I think I had some of the most amazing teachers in the world. My science instruction in high school or college or even middle school wasn't really contextualized in like how I experience day to day life or something, even something I might see in the news. And so that to me is like the thing of, all right, so we're making the shift. So like the NGSS became a thing in the 2021, 2020, around that time. And we're starting to see the push towards phenomena-based science teaching and an increased push for inquiry-based science teaching, because that was always there, but they're trying to make it more and more authentic. But what I see happening is that most of the time, like we're wanting to make that shift without really shifting the foundation of it. And so it's, yeah, make it phenomena based, but also your phenomenon is this thing that none of the children in your room have heard of. And so and then as far as they're concerned, I'm still just teaching them a collection of facts. I just added some extra facts they got to learn. And it's how do I contextualize this in something that they can actually hold on and grab onto so that they don't feel like this is just a unrelated set of facts that this lady is telling me I need to know.
And one of the things that we talk about with leadership dynamics is when you want to get buy-in from the people that you're leading, you have to create a sense of ownership and you have to create a sense of pride in what you're asking people to do. And one of the best ways to do that is to make it relatable to them and make sure they understand the why. And if the content you're asking kids to do is something they have no clue why they're doing it, where they're interested in it, they're not going to be engaged at all. Along that way, the air element that I talk about is about how we embrace adversity when we're faced with it. And by the sound of this conversation, there is adversity in your profession when it comes to that element and aspect. How do you stay grounded in your instructional delivery when faced with that adversity of being told to push kids in a direction that you might not want to push them?
I just am like, okay, what are you gonna do? Fire me? Like it's that it sounds fluent, but also it is my energy because I just like these are I guess I kind of separate things into columns in my head of these are things that I feel like are best practices, and they're generally going to be research based because like that I have that background, so I'm going to do my due diligence. And these things I see or I have evidence that it's worked in my classroom. These are things that the administration or whatever want me to do that I don't necessarily think it's great, but I don't think it's harmful. If we have time, I'll do it. And then these are things that I feel like they want me to do and I feel are actively harmful. And so either I'm just not going to do it or I will go like for state testing. I can't not give kids a state test, but I'm going to have a very frank conversation with my students about state testing and like all the factors that are going around it because I don't want them to internalize those results. And I think for me, it's just, I don't know if it's like growing up how I grew up or like how my parents raised me or what it is, but it's just I have a line that's like in my body. And I'm just like, I'm not gonna do something that I feel like is actively harmful for kids. And if I lose my job, I lose my job. I have other skills. And more than that, I'm gonna teach in shortage. I teach science. I'll find a job.
I love that response because so many people are afraid to root hard into their earth and stand with their values because they're afraid of losing their job. And that's a big pressure that people face. Like financial situations, thinking there's nothing else out there for you, that can pull you away from your core values and make you make decisions that you're not comfortable making. And that's how you end up with burnout. That's how you end up unhappy
Yeah.
is you pull away from your root, you pull away from your core, and you end up doing things that were imposed on you versus things that you get to feel you were a part of the innovative process with.
Yes. And I just want to name that this is not my perspective the entire time I've been teaching. I definitely grew into this. And also, I'm a single woman with no children. it is a lot easier for me to say if I lose my job, I lose my job than it might be like if you have kids, you have support. Because it'd be a lot easier for me to make a way because everybody else is depending on me.
Yeah, and that's a very fair point as well. Some of my favorite conversations just in my workplace are with the people that are eligible for retirement but haven't retired yet, because they get to play the line of, what are you going to do? Fire me? I can retire at any point and I'm good to go and I'm happy and I'm set. Those are the ones that are passionate. Those are the ones that bring the most meaning towards things. And again, it's finding a way to stay rooted into your core through your decision making process. And for you, you're doing that by not being afraid to be perceived that your value is wrong, because your value is right. First of all, you have such a good root in that value. And so every decision you're making, you're rooting it in the right things. And that makes risks not feel like risks. It makes things feel exciting. It makes opportunities exciting. I want to shift a little bit here because you're also involved in content creation and collaboration.
Mhm.
So, what strategies do you find most effective for engaging a diverse audience with complex scientific topics?
I just try to talk about science, like in my science content stuff. I try to talk about science the way I would talk about it if I were like talking to my goddaughter. She's getting ready to go to middle school. I can't. And I don't know. My other love has always been English and storytelling. And so I think like I default to storytelling science. And I think about different scientific concepts as storylines. I think about different, like I was the other day talking about like the mitochondria as a movie character. I really think about things in these ways. And it always helped me to remember, but I think it also makes it feel more tangible and relatable, especially when you're talking about like topics that feel really abstract. And then I just sometimes I just ramble and then try to go in and what in here is cohesive, makes sense. And then to find those things that I feel like are things that everybody has had a conversation about at some point or another, and be like, here's the science. Like recently I was talking about mosquitoes and different scents. I know some people who are like, I always get eaten by mosquitoes. You don't ever get a bite. What's going on? And so I'm talking about that people care, or with fireflies and thinking back like ecology and sustainability and conservation, so many people have these core memories of fireflies as a kid. And so that's going to be something that gets people invested in learning the behind it.
Awesome. And on top of that, you also do, we're alluding to it here, you do some instructional coaching. What does that look like for you?
I think I'm still like really ironing out the details of it. For me, I think in the purest form, in the like more closest to the one-on-one like form, it's really listening a lot and going, all right, so just talk to me about what you're seeing and what you're frustrated about. And then from there, it's okay, how can we put things into place so that we can help you not be so much frustrated? Or I'm hearing you say that I do a lot of that, which I know has to be so annoying. It's like somebody will tell me all the time, like, so what I heard was, and then recapping back to you just because I want to make sure I understand correctly and I understand what it is you're really frustrated with so that we can come to an actual solution. Because I think a lot of times, at least what I experienced was I would say, I'm feeling A, B, and C. And then the answer would be, all right, so you need 1,000. And I'm like, we were in letters. Why are you giving me numbers? And so it's like doing that and then going, all right, so how can we make this work for you? And what I see most, and it's also the content matters a lot. Figuring out how to connect to students' everyday lives is a lot, and that's what I try to do and help people do, and help them to look beyond student surface behaviors of they just don't want to do it. No, they're probably just scared. So what can we do to support that instead of assuming they don't want to do it? But even beyond all of that, I think like the foundational thing is going, how are you? Are you okay? Because I think a lot of times, especially for teachers who really want to reach students who like are really passionate about what they teach and feel really connected to the profession, they're so much more liable to get burnt out because we will sacrifice ourselves in an attempt to reach kids. And that backfires every single time because then you're burnt out and upset and then you get mean and irritable. And it's just like a little roller coaster and kids never know what to expect with you. And so like before any of that, it's, hey buddy, how are you? And how can we help you be like more well rested and just well more long term?
Absolutely. And I love the early message you said in that conversation around understanding the why. Again, you're bringing it back to why are we feeling this way? What's going on? And when you repeat it back, you use the term people might get sick of that. But I actually think it's a really powerful part of coaching because not only does it make sure that you understand what's going on,
Mhm.
but it's validating to them that hopefully they understand what they're relaying is going on. Because more often than not, when you repeat that back and it's not what they wanted shared, they'll correct you and they'll say,
Yeah.
actually, it's this. And then you can get to the root of what they were trying to say. And then they actually get to the root of what they're feeling. And
Yes.
then once you get to their root, now you can make that progress of coaching them through. Okay, what does our success look like? How do you think we can get there? What have you already tried? Along that way, you have probably faced some challenges in instructional coaching with people. What are some of the challenges you're facing as an instructional coach, and how are you overcoming that?
I think for me, it's really, I'm a busybody and a know it all. And I just have to rein that in because I feel like all of my most effective experiences with coaching, like when I like being coached myself, is when my coach isn't telling me what to do, but is saying, it's just like asking me questions, which felt like feels really frustrating sometimes because I just want you to give me a plan. And but it's so much more like long term and effective to implement if there really is prompting you to figure things out yourself. And so learning how to do that and not just go, here are all the things I see and here's how you can fix it. Because it's like to teach a person to fish metaphor. It's
I
so
was
much
just
more.
thinking about that as you were sharing that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was. How does that go again? Yeah. Okay.
Give a man
Yeah.
a fish, eats for a day, teach him to fish. He
Yeah.
can do it. Yeah.
Eat for a lifetime. Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. And we're getting into the water element here now, which is how we go about change process and change dynamics in fluid motions. We talk about change having to come from that individualized motivation, their decisions that are rooted with them. How do you actually go about facilitating that change amongst not just the people you're instructional coaching, but
I'm just like a little cheerleader in real life. I'm a person who I really enjoy seeing people enjoy things and seeing people like be happy. And so and if you tell me that you have a goal, I'm going to be like, hey, what you did? What have you done? How's it going? Like that's who I am. And so I think I bring that energy into those spaces and into my classroom of, hey, like you told me that you want to do X, Y, and Z. Well, what are we doing to get there? And what's this class's place in that? So why is you doing well in this class? How is it connected to this goal you told me that you had? And then just like being an encourager of just being like, hey, you are capable of doing this. You can do this. We don't talk negatively about ourselves. We're going to speak positively over ourselves. Because a lot of what I mean, it all goes back to like your own well being and then like mindset, I think over and over again. And that is especially true with students. I teach high school. So by the time they get to me, a lot of them have a lot of internalized narratives about their ability to do science. And I think I spend the first 3 or 4 months of the year just like, hey, you can do it. You can. You're smart. Like just try. And then like when they finally like I guess she's been telling me this for months and she keeps making me like she keeps just looking at me. So I guess I'll try. And then it works. And they're like, wait, maybe it's not so bad. And so it's just like giving them encouragement and then giving them the support they need so they can see success. And then as you do it over and over again, it starts rolling downhill and picking up momentum. And then I ask a lot of questions. I'm like, just tell me about it. Why do you think that? Which, and again, I think it's like it can feel annoying at the time, but then later on, they're like, yeah, that was helpful.
yeah, those kids are probably like, "Oh my god, I hate this. It's horrible." But at the end of the day, they're very happy about it. You end up becoming some of their favorite teachers because of what you're doing. And one of the things I share with people all the time is you cannot teach effort. You cannot teach grit in somebody, but you can create spaces of comfort where people are encouraged to try and
Mhm.
encouraged to build their own grit. And so creating that environment with positive feedback saying, you can do this, you got this, and then actually setting them up for success, that makes them want to try. And then when things don't go well, it makes them want to persevere
Mhm.
and continue. And so you're actually just creating that space for success. Within that as well, Could you share an example of when you've implemented an innovative or unconventional method?
Let's see. So one of my favorite things to do with students is to give them a project where we don't really have a whole lot of rails. And I feel like a lot of times you have to have this very detailed rubric, and you have to be very detailed because if you don't, they won't know what to do. Or if you don't, they'll do da 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 da. And I'm just like, or what if I just tell them we're gonna go on a spaceship to a planet and it's gonna take 3,000 years to get there, and I need them to figure out how we do it. And like that's we did that for a project at my last job actually, and it was one of the best experiences I had. I just like to when there's time and space because you can't do it in every class, and depending on the restrictions. But I think that is truly one of my favorite things. Just let's pose a question, and then I just want you to go ham trying to answer it. I need you to pull in the things we've been learning, but I'm not going to tell you a whole lot. I'm just going to give you this like scenario, and then I just need you to go after it. And the way my students were invested in it, like the things they came up with, I learned a ton because I think that's the other piece of it is giving them these big broad questions that you don't know the answer to. And I think a lot of times teachers can get nervous about that because I don't know. Da, da, da. It's fine. It's science. That's what we do, right? It's figure out the things that we don't know, and just really letting kids take the lead. And then I guess another thing is sometimes I'm like, it's a project or whatever. You can it can be a dance, it can be a poem, whatever. Just as long as you can make it clear how you're connecting it to science. I don't need it to be in this rigid format. And I have had kids turn in dances for assignments before, but the explanation was really good. So it worked.
I love that. I'm very much on the same boat with you. One of I have two favorite things that I do in science, and one of them started in a space unit when we teach it in grade 9, and then it's expanded a bit to our physics units. And it's the use of bottle rockets, and the you pose the challenge of, hey, I want to launch this bottle rocket up into the sky with an egg in it, and I want it to fall and land safely. I need you to build this and tell me how it's going to work and calculate the forces on it. And the kids get creative with it and they have fun. The second one is not as open world. Actually, this one was shown to me, but it's teaching biology and genetic traits. And we get into, we call it our baby making lab. And so they sit down with partners and I give out little candies that represent the alleles for genetics. And they pull out their little candy alleles and they build their baby together. But we have fun with it. We put candles at the tables. We set a fireplace and we tell them to pick the right partner because that's always important when that's happening. They go home and they tell their parents they made babies. And of course, I have to email a little bit beforehand and say, hey, they're not actually. It's a little fun science thing, but finding ways to get creative and to be open and to build that positivity. It doesn't have to be sit and get
Yeah.
workbook notes because not everyone's going to learn that way. You are going to have some successful people because that's just how people flow. Like I could sit, take
Yeah.
notes, and then I would be fine. That was my style. But the people to my left and right, that's not their style and they're not successful that way at all. So differentiating. And when you create such an open ended task that way too, it naturally differentiates because people are going to gravitate towards what they're comfortable with.
Yes.
With that's a risk. And now we get to dive into the fire element, which is the idea of risk taking. And what I love about the fire element is, well, earth, water, and air are internal with us, and how we deal with our core values, embrace adversity, and implement change. That's from within. But fire can be an external source from outside, but it can also be an internal flame that's burning within us. What are some of the biggest risks you've taken in your educational career?
I think going like back for my PhD was one because like I had a job and I enjoyed it, and I was at home where all of my family was, and I quit and I moved to Georgia to pursue the PhD and like to a city where I didn't know anybody or anything, and that was really the first time I had done something like that long term, and it felt huge and scary. And then just like in the process, and I did that full time for 4 years before I came back to the classroom. And I think like just a lot of the things I did during that process got me to a point where risk taking felt less scary, and where I was more willing to speak up about things. And like during the times I said things, people who I knew probably didn't want to hear them, even though they could have a potential impact on my career. And but yeah, I think it all for me, a lot of it ties back into the like going for that program. I think maybe another one was my second year teaching. I was supposed to be teaching the same class I had taught my first year. which was biology. It was the state tested biology. And the school I was at had IB, and we had diploma program biology, and they had hired a new teacher for it. And I just saw her like 2 or 3 days before school was going to start. And she seemed like, she was like, I don't want to teach this. I can't teach this. Like, just having a fit. And I was like, this doesn't look great. And I went down to our administration. I was like, look, she doesn't want to teach it. She's overwhelmed. Let her teach biology, which is something she's comfortable with, and I'll go do it. And I hadn't taught it before either. But I just was like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. But she clearly is not in a place to take this on right now. And it was a risk. Like, I had to learn. It's a huge curriculum. And it was like 2 days before school started, and I had already had everything set up for my class. And I really had to start from scratch in a lot of ways. But it was really one of the most rewarding experiences doing that class. And because as a result, I ended up teaching the same group for 3 years in a row, which was really great.
Because you're so strong in what you deliver in your pedagogy, the pedagogy itself doesn't change. The way you go about teaching doesn't change, but what you had to teach changed. And so, as much as we say it's a fresh start, you're starting from scratch, all of your foundation in how you teach, that pedagogy, that's still there. And that's what probably made it not so bad, is you knew how to teach, you just didn't know what to teach. And then once you went in and found your what, it probably became a lot easier to figure out the how you were going to do it as well. Now, science nerding myself, I'm curious, when we look ahead in the world of science, is there anything that's exciting to you that's emerging?
Okay. Yes. So I don't know if you've heard. So there's marine algae, right? And it is currently, looks like it like an endosymbiotic event is happening. Like with nitrogen fixing, currently, like the current understanding is that like only bacteria can fix nitrogen, right? There's a little marine algae that has what we're calling a nitroblast. It might be an organelle, and it's really exciting.
That's amazing. And you just had a moment there. I loved it. And to see you perk up and get excited to share, that was incredible. Is there anything else that we should unpack that's coming out that's exciting?
Oh, I really cut myself off apart. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't think this is new knowledge, but it was me. The cicadas that emerged this year, they had a fungus. It doesn't have fungus. It's like an STD. That was really weird and cool. Oh, but the cicadas this year was Brood emerged. And the last time both emerged at the same time was like the founding fathers still alive. And it'd be years what happened again. And there are other things that are escaping my mind right now. But those are the two things that are like I've been.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Along your journey, who has been some of your biggest influences and mentors, and what lessons did you take from them?
So my dissertation chair, Dr. Mary Outward, she's now retired from the University of Georgia. She was just a role model for me. She was the first Black woman to graduate with a degree in chemistry from her college. She was the first in a lot of places, and she was one of the pioneers of culturally relevant education within the science education space. And then really look up to Bettina and Cynthia Miller. Those are who I got to meet and interact with and learn from while I was at GA. But then even just and absolutely cannot, I'll be remiss not to mention like the people who participated in my dissertation, which was focused on the experiences of Black women for secondary science teachers. I learned so much from that experience. And then really I've just had so many great experiences with people around me. I've been really lucky to work with really great people. I think my current team that I work on is amazing, and just their willingness to try new things and the way that I see on our team, we have so many people who really are just like, how do we do this the best that we can? And that's not always the experience you have with learning teams. And then of course just like my parents, and because truly for my mom, I feel like I've really learned how like to focus in on details and make sure I get things done. And then like my dad really always just was like really exposed me to a lot of stuff, made sure that I was aware of the world and knew to question it and knew how to stand up for what I believed. And so yeah, I just ramble on forever if you let me. So I'm gonna stop.
It's really neat to hear all of the influences around you, Because that's what it should be. We are influenced by everything around us. And if you're a science person, you truly believe everything around you is making some kind of impact or influence in decisions you're making. So it's actually awesome. I wouldn't call it rambling. You're sharing all of the evidence that's around you that's influenced you and impacted you. Now, science teacher or not, people listening, what are you hoping that they action in their lives tomorrow from your message?
That they internalize it, like they have to take, like, you have to take care of yourself first in order to take care of other people, and that you deserve to experience joy in your classroom. Your classroom is not, like, your students matter, they matter a ton, but if you don't experience joy in your classroom, it's very hard to make it a space where they can. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like, figure out how to take care of you and be well, so that you, and then you can do all these other things. And then really just, if you really believe that something matters for student experience, or that something conversely is harmful for the student experience, figure out how to stand 10 toes down on that, figure out how to put your line in the sand, and or figure out how to be subversive about it. Like, you don't have to go up and say, no, I'm not doing it. It's just, all right, you can say that, and then I'm gonna come out to work and teach. It's especially for things that you feel really strongly about.
And what does your future look like, Jordan?
In the immediate future, I'll be taking a class this fall. I'm very excited for a new school year. Still teaching, still assistant coaching girls basketball, which has been really fun. And my goal is to just expand, like, the work that I'm doing personally, to help science teachers have the experience joining the classroom and taking care of themselves and teaching their students, making those students feel really seen in what they're learning. And also helping just, like, the general public, adults who feel like science isn't for me, I'm not smart enough, I'm not whatever, feel connect to science and feel like they can understand it and they can engage with it and they can enjoy it.
Jordan, how can listeners get in touch with you if they have more questions?
You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at TisDrJ, TISDRJ. And that is also, like, my teacher facing website, TisDrJ.com. And then, like, for more science content-y stuff, it is staycuriousyall.com. And yeah, I'm in all those places. And then I also have the science content page on TikTok and Instagram, which is drj.staycurious. Yeah, you can reach out to me any of those places.
And we'll link all of that in the description of this episode. Jordan, I can't believe it's already approaching 45 minutes here. Where did the time go? It's always so fun for me to sit down and connect and to hear stories and to see your passion and enthusiasm for what you do. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's fun.
You've been listening to the Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.